Welcome back to Grade 8 Geography, Unit Number 2, Global Inequalities, Economic Development and Quality of Life. This is lesson number 23. Are we improving quality of life? How can we find out if aid given to developing countries is improving their quality of life? To do this, we need to look at the goals that aid was meant to achieve and evaluate data that has been collected after the data was collected to see whether those goals were reached. Earlier, we read about the 8 Millennium Goals. The outcomes of these goals were not just the work of the UN. The outcomes were also affected by economic, social, cultural, political, and environmental factors. In your textbook, take a look at Figure 8.9 on page 235. You will see that some of the goals were met, such as providing access to safe drinking water and technology to more people. However, not all of the goals were reached. There is still gender inequality in higher education, and the proportion of people without access to basic sanitation did not improve. Based on this data, development efforts are not working as well as they could be. In the past, donor countries or organizations decided how the aid they gave would be used. Sometimes donors only aimed for short-term solutions, such as giving food, instead of trying to make long-term improvements, such as teaching farmers how to improve their farming techniques. Sometimes donors only helped in ways that benefited themselves. For example, the recipient country was forced to buy materials from the donor instead of using their own resources. In other cases, the aid that was given was misspent or wasted by the government or NGO in the recipient country. And yes, look at this political cartoon. You can have this abundance of aid, but when it goes through political challenges, there's a fair degree of corruption. So all of that aid does not reach who it's meant to reach. Just looking here, some examples of wasted aid money. 19 million pounds on consultants were spent in 1 year. 65 million pounds on people who just came in with ideas. Nothing was getting done. It was just ideas being given. 90,000 pounds on newspapers in a year. 98,000 pounds designing a new logo for UK Aid last year. Close to 100,000 pounds used just for a logo. That wouldn't help anybody in need. Look at this, 3 ergonomic chairs, 3 comfortable chairs worth close to 1,500 pounds. Look at that, 713,000 pounds on staff expenses last year. All of this money, millions of pounds, not going to people in need. In 2005, donor countries and organizations from around the world met in Paris to create guidelines that would make development aid more effective. In 2008 and 2011, the following updated guidelines were announced. Recipients would choose their own development goals. Donors and recipients would work together as equal partners. Donors would help the people in recipient countries acquire skills and knowledge which they need to reach their goals. Recipients aim to use their own systems, trucks, roads, media, staff, to deliver the aid. Donors and recipients were to write plans and schedules to make sure that they are on track with meeting their goals. When the project is complete, donors and recipients are to both summarize the results, and recipients are responsible for the money they use. This was all about cutting down the amount of money that was being spent on consultants and staff from other countries, making sure the money went more towards actual goals. How effective are individual aid organizations at achieving their goals to improve quality of life? Let's look at two well-known organizations and determine whether they have met their goals. The first organization is the Global Fund, which provides indirect aid to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. The Global Fund helps to create partnerships between governments, private companies, individual donors, and people affected by these diseases. The Global Fund gives money to programs that are run by local experts in over 140 countries. The Global Fund evaluates the results of the programs it supports. It found that by 2014, the programs it supports had decreased the number of deaths due to AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria by 50% in the past 14 years. That is a great statistic. Certainly room for future growth, but to cut down the number of deaths by 50% in under 20 years means that there's some good work being done. Sopar Bala Vikasa, or SBV, is a non-profit organization that combines a Canadian NGO and an Indian NGO. SBV works to create sustainable development in India. One of its main goals is to provide resources that people, especially women in poor Indian communities, need to help themselves. By 2014, SBV had helped to train 10,000 community leaders. It helped build 6,000 wells, 620 water purification plants, and 20,000 toilets. It helped 15,000 women entrepreneurs get economic support for their businesses. So, a very successful organization. Okay, so let's conclude today's lesson/video by considering the following, and we will discuss these two questions at the start of our next class. Number one, what development goals should our government be committed to? And number two, how can we let our government know that we want these goals to be met? You might want to go back and watch the video at least one more time before you put the video on pause to write down your thoughts on these two questions. So please put the video on pause now. All right, be ready to share your responses to these two questions at the start of our next class. But until we meet then, this concludes today's video.